Hi, my name's Eric, and I'll be reading you selections from the e-edition of today's Cape Cod Times. Today's date is Monday, April 7th of 2025. We'll start with the weather, as we always do, and across the Cape and Islands today, it's going to be cooler with rain and drizzle this morning, clearing up maybe this afternoon, but then cloudy again tonight with a couple of showers, a low of 37 in the overnight, a high of 43 this afternoon. On Tuesday, tomorrow, showers will be around in the morning, and then it'll turn breezy in the afternoon, high of 47 expected, a low quite cold of 27 tomorrow night. So be careful. If you do have flowers that you've put out thinking spring is here, bring them back in for a night or two. On Wednesday, partly sunny, high of 46, again, low of 29 in this case, in the overnight. On Thursday, it warms up a bit, high of 48 in the day, 38 in the overnight with increasing cloudiness. On Friday, cloudy with rain becoming intermittent all day, but warming up, a high of 53 and a low of 44. So April showers are here, and we will definitely have a little touch of winter in the overnight. Be prepared to bundle up, because it's going to be chilly at night this week. The sun will rise at 6:14 a.m. today. It'll set at 7:13 p.m. We'll have 12 hours, 59 minutes of daylight, and the moon will rise at 2:04 p.m., setting at 4:05 a.m. Now heading to the front of the paper, where, of course, the news and the lottery results are kept. And we read these lottery results because somebody asked for them. If there's something you would like read to people who are blind or print disabled, you can email us at info@audiblelocalledger.org or call us at 508-539-2030 and we'll consider reading it. And if you miss any of the information that we share in our readings, you can always go to audiblelocalledger.org, our fully compliant with disability standards website, and click on the Listen tab. And you can catch up on a week's worth of any of the news that you might have missed. We also keep a wide variety of periodicals and literature up there for your listening pleasure, as well as our grocery guides and radio plays, all there for your entertainment for people who are blind or print disabled at audiblelocalledger.org. Now, we go to the masslottery.com website because the Cape Cod Times goes to press too early to give you the latest results. So for the numbers game of Sunday, April 6th, in the midday drawing, those numbers were 3, 8, 3, 6. Again, yesterday's midday drawing numbers in the numbers game, 3, 8, 3, 6. In the evening drawing last night of the numbers game, the numbers were 5, 6, 7, 4. Again, last night's evening drawing numbers for the numbers game, 5, 6, 7, 4. Mass cash results for Sunday, April 6th, 3, 11, 16, 26, and 27. And Lucky for Life rounds out our results for the lottery for Sunday, April 6th with 3, 6, 27, 37, and 40, with 11 the bonus number. Good luck to all who play, and remember us if you win. Now, from the cover of today's, or the front page of today's Cape Cod Times, the headline reads, Taunton and Tribe ink deal. An agreement lets Mashpee Wampanoag collect revenue from Welcome Center slot machines, addresses the $2.4 million they owe to the city. By Emma Rindlisbacher of the Taunton Daily Gazette in Taunton. On March 21st, the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe and the city of Taunton signed a new agreement regarding the Taunton Casino project. The memorandum of agreement clears the way for the tribe and potentially the city to start collecting revenue from the Welcome Center that was opened by the tribe in January. The Welcome Center originally had 10 gaming machines, and the revenue from the gaming machines went to charity. But the Welcome Center has since been expanded to 50 slot machines, and the tribe can now collect revenue from them. The PAC says the tribe intends to obtain financing for a larger casino project during the first half of calendar year 2025. It also addresses the issue of $2.4 million worth of unpaid payments that the tribe is required to make under a previous intergovernmental agreement with the city. Here's what we know. MOA allows tribe and potentially city to collect revenue. When the Welcome Center opened, it originally only had 10 gaming machines, and the revenue from those machines went to charity. That's because the casino project is governed by an intergovernmental agreement between the city and the tribe. According to a copy of the agreement, which the Gazette obtained through a public records request, the tribe is required to pay the city a guaranteed amount of exactly $8 million every year, starting at the date that the casinos open to the public for gaming. But the March 21st agreement has now cleared the way for the tribe to start collecting revenue from its Welcome Center. As a preliminary step to aid in obtaining financing of the project contemplated under the IGA, the authority intends to develop a Welcome Center consisting of temporary modular buildings containing up to 50 slot machines, the MOA says. The MOA also says that due to its temporary nature, the temporary facility shall not be deemed the casino or the project within the meaning of the IGA. That means that while operating the Welcome Center, the tribe doesn't have to make the $8 million a year payments that were mandated by the IGA. How much revenue will Taunton get from the Welcome Center? However, the city may receive some revenue from that Welcome Center. Commencing on the first day of the calendar month, immediately following the date that the number of operational slot machines exceeds 10, the MOA says, the tribe shall remit to the city a monthly payment in the amount of 2.05% of net slot revenue. The Memorandum of Understanding also says that the tribe does not have to pay the monthly payment if a financial benchmark related to how much revenue the Welcome Center makes is below a certain threshold. According to the MOA, the tribe hasn't secured financing of the project under the IGA as of the date of this MOA, but intends to pursue and secure financing of said project during the first half of calendar year 2025. The MOA also says that after June 30th of 2025, the parties may reassess whether the Welcome Center constitutes a casino or the project within the meaning of the IGA. Prior to June 30th of 2025, the parties will jointly review the status of this MOA, the temporary facility, and any further interim agreements or circumstances concerning the gaming-related facilities at the site, the MOA says. Under the previous IGA, the tribe was required to make payments in lieu of taxes to compensate the city for the tax revenue that was lost by converting industrial land into land that a casino could be built on. The tribe currently owes the city $2.4 million for 4 years of missed payments. The MOA says the city will receive the owed payments on or before June 30th of 2025, and that the payments would be made by a lender who would finance a larger casino project. Said sum of $2,355,556.53 shall be included in the authority's financing documents for its anticipated casino project under the IGA to be paid directly to the city by the lender financing said project, with payment to be received by the city on or before June 30th of 2025, the MOA reads. Keeping it local, we move inside the paper. The rest of the stories on the front page we'll get to, but they are national in scope. There is a photo on page 2, protesters in Falmouth. Demonstrators carry signs and sing along during a hands-off demonstration at the Village Green in Falmouth on Saturday. The Village Green was about 3/4 filled with people. The demonstration, along with others on Cape Cod and across the country, protested the policies and actions of President Trump and Elon Musk in Trump's second term. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told USA Today earlier in the week that protests, lawsuits, and lawfare will not sway Trump from delivering on the promises he made to make our federal government more efficient and more accountable. Hyannis man sentenced for possession of fentanyl and a gun, by Desiree Nick-Fargen. A 32-year-old Hyannis man was sentenced to 8 years in prison on gun and drug charges, according to the office of Leah Foley, U.S. Attorney for the District of Massachusetts. Tommy Lee Galvin was sentenced on April 3rd in federal court in Boston by U.S. District Court Judge Angel Kelly to 97 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release for possession of a gun for the purpose of a drug trafficking crime and possession of fentanyl with intent to distribute, according to the press release. Galvin was arrested in June of 2023 in Barnstable and accused of having 6 grams of fentanyl, a privately made gun, 3 rounds of 9mm ammunition, and 11 rounds of .45 caliber ammunition. He was indicted in August of 2023. In December of 2024, Galvin pleaded guilty to charges of possession of a firearm for the purpose of drug trafficking crime and possession of fentanyl with the intent to distribute. Parker's River Landing is the new name for future West Yarmouth Park, by Susan Vaughn. Work is progressing on the future Parker's River Landing in West Yarmouth, where a fall opening is planned. The long-planned transformation of the 22-acre former drive-in property to a park is seeing a lot of construction activity on the entrance path off Route 28. Bike and walking paths around the large open space area, a kayak landing, and a nearly completed boardwalk where workers are installing engraved planks that were purchased by local residents. It's actually happening as planned, Yarmouth town planner Kathy Williams said Thursday. The town has spent many years evaluating public uses for the long vacant site at 669 Route 28, which was purchased in 1986 for recreation. The park is estimated to be completed in October or November, Williams said. The general contractor, Robert B., our Marine Division, has done a great job and worked efficiently, she said. Town staff has worked with consultant Beta Group and the local committee, guiding the property's reuse, to successfully work through the design and permitting. The project has also had a lot of community support, Williams said. Williams also noted that the Select Board recently changed the name of the park to Parker's River Landing based on a request from the public. It had been called Parker's River Boardwalk Park since last year. In addition to the pathways around a large open space, the new park will include a parking lot, restrooms, a natural playscape area, a kayak launch on the river, interpretive signs, space for artist shanties and public art, native landscaping, the lawn area for periodic special events, and a wooded pathway to the elevated boardwalk overlooking the salt marshes to the south, according to a description on the town's website. The town also received an $18,000 shared streets grant from the State Department of Transportation for 4 themed bike racks that will include whimsical marine creatures, such as dolphins and a pelican, Williams said. One will be at the playground where a pirate ship has already been installed. A bid for restrooms will soon be awarded, Williams said. The project initially received funding from various local and state sources totaling $13 million, but other money has okayed by the town to meet the increasing construction costs, Williams said. I think it'll be heavily used, she said, noting the popularity of the Grays Beach boardwalk. There are pretty good sunsets at the Parker's River site, Williams said. Sales of the engraved boardwalk planks are underway with 140 installed, and up to 200 can be installed during construction, Williams said. Eventually, the boardwalk can hold about 2,000 planks. The planks cost $350 for individuals or family, $450 for nonprofits, and $550 for local businesses, and they serve as a source of revenue for operation and maintenance of the park. From the Cape and Islands section, Harwich woman indicted on 15 animal cruelty charges by Zane Razak. A Harwich woman accused of killing several of her sheep has been indicted on 15 counts of animal cruelty. Meredith Viprino pleaded not guilty to the charges during her arraignment at Barnstable Superior Court on Wednesday, April 2nd, according to the clerk's office. The indictment was returned on March 19th. No lawyer was listed for Viprino as of Thursday, according to the clerk's office. According to a police report, a Harwich police officer received a call around 3:19 p.m. on November 25th, and the caller stated that their son had bought 35 Chatham Road in Harwich 3 days earlier. The property was in foreclosure and had been put up for auction in July of 2024, according to police. The caller and her brother walked the property November 25th and saw dead sheep in a stall when they entered the barn. 3 sheep were still alive. The caller also said they met a woman, later identified as Viprino. The property's previous owner is listed as Barry Viprino. Meredith Viprino told them she knows about the deceased animals and she's leaving them to decompose, according to the police report, and then told them to leave. The caller returned to the house the next day to put fresh water and hay in the stall for the 3 living sheep, and only found 1 sheep still alive. A Harwich police officer and animal control officer then went to the house where they met Viprino in the driveway and said they'd been told about the dead animals and wanted to check any living animals in the barn. Viprino allegedly told them there were no longer any living animals, and she had killed the remaining sheep that morning by stabbing them in the throat, according to the police report. When the officers went into the barn, they found 2 dead sheep with stab wounds in their throat. A third sheep was also wounded in the throat but was still alive, though a veterinarian later had to euthanize this animal due to its poor condition and suffering, according to police. The animal control officer counted a total of 5 sheep with evidence of neck lacerations, a total of 15 dead sheep. While checking further for any additional living animals inside the barn area, I observed numerous deceased sheep in varying stages of decay, some with skeletal remains showing, reads the police report. Many of the sheep were too badly decomposed to see if they too had suffered neck injuries. Police also found a lack of food and water in the stalls. Viprino was placed under arrest and taken to the Harwich Police Department, where she was later released on $500 cash bail. In 2017, Meredith Viprino and her husband Barry were in regulatory hot water with their farming plans for property they owned in Harwich. Her next court date is April 23rd. Also from the Cape and Islands, Osprey Can You See? Fishhawks arriving daily on Cape Cod by Steve Heslip. Stakeouts are a dreaded part of photojournalism, most often occurring outside courthouses awaiting the arrival of a police transport in the familiar perp walk. These fast-moving events can involve hours of waiting, often in bad weather, for mere seconds of photography, most of which is unusable. Much as I would like to think I'm not a paparazzi, I have been assigned a good many times to chase around celebrities. The origin of the word paparazzi dates to the Federico Fellini's film La Dolce Vita in 1960, where the character named Paparazzo plays a lensman chasing after celebrities. Staking out wildlife on Cape Cod could easily be a full-time photography job. My record on the OCEARCH shark tagging boat remains intact. 4 trips out over several years, and during each trip, not a shark was caught or even sighted. Right whales have been much more reliable, and they've never shut me out. My track record with birds is much less reliable. I'm still sore about missing the ferruginous hawk this past winter. So, when ospreys started showing up overhead with their familiar calls, it was time for nest stakeout. The fishhawks have become plentiful and easy to find perched along their giant stick piles near their hunting grounds. A recent slow news day seemed the perfect time for a morning osprey search. The 5-mile osprey tour starts with a nest at Calmus Beach, winds over to another just west of Keys Beach, both in Hyannis. Then a few more left turns out to Cavell Beach in Centerville, and last, a nest on the Centerville River near Craigville Beach. First pass turned up not one bird. Not wanting a strikeout, I made a second loop after a nearby assignment. Cavell's nest now had a pair of birds. I took up a position in the parking lot based on the wind direction and rigged up the jumbo lens to rest on the side view mirror. Just like airplanes, birds usually take off into the wind. One bird was almost hidden in the unkempt nest, the other perched for takeoff. I managed a few shots being stared down and then settled in for a takeoff. Number 1 rule of a stakeout, always be ready to take a picture. A quick distraction can waste hours of time spent waiting. Sure enough, I glanced down at my phone, incoming text message. A pedestrian walked past the nest, the bird took flight. Oh, opportunity missed. Looking for redemption, I stayed another hour. Bird number 2 stayed put. I finally left to try another day. For the Hubbard family, there's a photo of young people, running into cold water Sunday afternoon. There's a photo of that with an American flag flying in the background. Swimmers head into the cold water Sunday afternoon off Harding Beach in Chatham for the annual April Fool's Plunge. Since 2008, members of the Chatham Fire Department have organized the plunge to raise money to support a local individual or family. This year's swim supports the Hubbard family. In October of 2024, a fire broke out at a rental home in Clinton, New York, where John and Shannon Hubbard and their children Jack, who was 3, and Maggie, 1, were vacationing. Shannon Hubbard, a Chatham elementary school teacher, and Maggie died in the fire. John Hubbard's a Dennis police officer, and his son Jack survived the fire. And we'll complete the local news portion of our reading, which we always do first, with a high school roundup, some sports. Falmouth boys lacrosse scores 15 goals in home opener win by Courtney Jacobs. The Falmouth boys lacrosse team is in the win column as they beat Silver Lake 15-3 Saturday. Jackson Smith finished with 4 goals, while Connor Casolito, Jamison Murphy, and Nate Bushy each collected 2 goals for Falmouth. In other high school sports action in boys lacrosse, it was Plymouth South 9, Sandwich 5. Nantucket 11, Martha's Vineyard 4. In baseball, it was Walpole 11, Falmouth 4. Nauset 6, Fairhaven 3. In softball, it was Bristol Plymouth 22, Nauset 10. In boys tennis, Martha's Vineyard 5, Nantucket 0. In boys volleyball, it was Barnstable 3, Greater Lawrence Tech 0. And we've completed all the local news. We will do our obituaries at the half hour, as we usually do. That is also a different kind of local news. But now we will move on to the regional or national news on the front page of today's Cape Cod Times. And a reminder, today's date is April 7th, a Monday of 2025. Analysis on the front page of the Cape Cod Times. Tariffs test the presidency and the world. Trump places big bet in ambitious second term by Susan Page of USA Today. Donald Trump's always been comfortable taking risks, from his early real estate deals to his late-in-life jump into electoral politics. Now, by imposing tariffs that have started a global trade war, he's taking the biggest gamble of his lifetime, and maybe of everybody else's. Trump is betting that mainstream economists and presidents since World War II have been wrong in generally embracing trade as the best way to build prosperity at home and forge peaceful relations around the world. Instead, he argues that slapping on the steepest tariffs since the 1930s will bring a windfall in federal revenue and force a historic resurgence of manufacturing in the United States. U.S. customs agents began collecting 10% baseline tariffs on Saturday, with stiffer rounds to begin this week. In capital letters, Trump posted on the social media site Truth Social, "This is an economic revolution and we will win. Hang tough. It won't be easy. The end result will be historic. We will make America great again." Exclamation, 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 capital letters. That confidence isn't shared by everyone. Investors, for instance. After Trump's announcement, the S&P 500 plunged 10.5%. And the Dow dropped by nearly 4,000 points, the market's worst week since early in the coronavirus pandemic in 2020. In 2 days, the markets lost more than $6 trillion in value. It's a decline that millions of Americans could track in real time in their retirement accounts. This is the biggest self-inflicted wound we've put on our economy in history, former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers said Sunday on ABC's This Week. There's no one, virtually, who doesn't work for the president who thinks this is a good idea. For the first time in the modern era, a president's policy decision, not the emergence of a deadly virus or a terrorist attack like 9/11, has shaken the global order. The repercussions not yet clear. The contrast between President Trump 1.0 and President Trump 2.0 are considerable. The stiff taxes on U.S. imports are only the latest in a series of decisions he's made since his second inauguration that demonstrate his determination to command far-reaching changes on everything from the size and role of the federal government to the traditional guardrails of the justice system. On Saturday, tens of thousands gathered on the National Mall in Washington to protest his early weeks in office, the largest of more than 1,000 hands-off marches planned in all 50 states. Signs and chants targeted cuts in education and health care, as well as the firing of federal workers and what demonstrators called assaults on democracy. The president, he wasn't around to see them. He was in Florida competing in the Senior Club Championship being held at the Trump National Golf Club in Jupiter. Trump no longer feels compelled to pay much attention to the Washington establishment voices that constrained some of his instincts during his first term. This time around, only tried and true loyalists have been appointed to the senior White House staff and the cabinet. Donald Trump's been talking about this his whole life, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said on CBS's Face the Nation, referring to his long-standing faith in tariffs. It's Donald Trump's agenda. and we're all here to help him execute it. Trump might have caught the classic disease of second-term presidents, overreach. Only 18 people in history have been elected twice to the White House, so it's hardly a surprise that they tend to think highly of their political acumen and their public standing. After his re-election in 2004, George W. Bush went on a doomed quest to partially privatize the Social Security system. The controversy that followed, along with the war in Iraq, were forces behind a tsunami in the 2006 midterm elections that swept Democrats into control of both the House and the Senate. In 2008, the GOP lost the White House too. Decades earlier, Franklin Roosevelt was frustrated in his first term by Supreme Court rulings against his New Deal legislation. After he won a second term in a landslide in 1936, he proposed expanding the High Court with up to 6 more appointments, presumably friendlier ones. The idea was greeted with bipartisan derision that included his own Vice President, John Nance Garner. In the next midterm, Democrats lost 72 House seats and 8 Senate seats. For both presidents, their second-term misadventures cost them some of the political currency they'd gained in their re-election, no longer available to spend on something else. Looking for an exit ramp? Even a few congressional Republicans, who've been a compliant bunch since Trump was sworn in, are raising concerns. With the support of 4 Republicans, the Senate passed a resolution last week to lift Trump's tariffs on Canada, a symbolic measure given that the House is unlikely to pass it or Trump to sign it, but a small alarm bell ringing for the White House anyway. 7 Republican senators are now co-sponsoring a bipartisan bill that would limit a president's power to impose tariffs and give Congress the power to end them. Voters are increasingly uneasy too. A Wall Street Journal poll published on Friday found Americans by 54 to 42% opposed to Trump's tariffs. 3/4 of those surveyed predicted they would raise the cost of things they buy, which is also the view of most economists. Jerome Powell, chair of the Federal Reserve, warned on Friday that Trump's tariffs risk fueling inflation and slowing growth. Trump's first-term vice president, Mike Pence, called them the largest peacetime tax hike in U.S. history. On Sunday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent suggested that the tariffs give Trump leverage in negotiations to reduce trade barriers, including, presumably, these tariffs he has just imposed. He's created maximum leverage for himself, and more than 50 countries have approached the administration about lowering their non-tariff trade barriers, lowering their tariffs, stopping currency manipulation, Bessent said on NBC's Meet the Press. Negotiations could give Trump an exit ramp if he wanted to take it. Unlike a Social Security proposal that failed or a court-packing scheme that was ridiculed, however, the imposition of tariffs has already had consequences that will be hard to unwind. Not that there are, so far, any signs from Trump that he wants to unwind them. Tariffs reflect not only his view of the economy, but of the U.S. role in the world, of America first. China has responded with a 34% tariff of its own on U.S. goods, and the European Union vows retribution as well. The sense of the United States as a reliable partner through thick and thin has been shaken. Canada's old relationship, quote-unquote, with the United States is now over, Prime Minister Mark Carney declared in a national televised address. What comes next? We're at the midway point in our reading, and regular listeners are aware it's at this point in every reading of the Cape Cod Times that we move to a different kind of local news. The obituaries, death notices, and memorials that are listed in the paper that day. And for the Cape Cod Times of April 7th of 2025, the first obituaries of Elsie Jean Barker of Pittsburgh, who passed in Pittsburgh, age 99, pastor's wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, gardener, and community inspiration. Elsie Jean Barker, age 99, devoted wife of the late Reverend Dr. William P. Barker, died April 4th. Jean dedicated her life to supporting her husband's ministries, Together, they founded Bower Hill Community Church in Mount Lebanon and went on to serve the congregations and communities of First Presbyterian Church in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and several churches on Cape Cod, where they eventually lived in retirement. Upon Bill's death, she returned to Pittsburgh, where she lived and returned to Bower Hill Community Church as a member until the end of her life. She was the inspiration behind the Pittsburgh-based Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood's puppet, Elsie Jean Platypus, who her husband voiced and operated on the program. The puppet demonstrated Jean's warmth and kindness. An avid organic gardener, Jean found joy in planting and growing, cooking and sewing. Feeding and hosting hundreds in her lifetime, she was faithful to her church, her family, and her community, lovingly sharing her talents, thoughtfulness, and generosity. Jean's legacy of service, creativity, and love will live on through the many lives she touched. Services were held privately and were arranged by the John F. Slater Funeral Home. There's another obituary in today's Cape Cod Times. There are two in total. This is of Mildred Regan Woynar of East Sandwich, formerly of Wellesley and West Roxbury, who passed on April 3rd at the age of 94. A native of Charlestown, Massachusetts, Mildred was born at the start of the Depression. She was ninth of 12 children. She was devoted wife of the late Henry Woynar and leaves many family and friends. Married to the love of her life, Henry, for 60 years, their devotion to each other was an inspiration to all who knew them. In their retirement, they enjoyed visiting immediate and extended family, traveling and planting spectacular gardens filled with flowers, which Mildred enjoyed until the end. Mildred's cheerful nature, her humor, kindness, and steadfast faith will be greatly missed. The Woynar family would like to thank Sandwich EMS Station 2 and hospice care at Cape Cod Hospital, especially Dr. Burrell and Nurse Lulu, for their compassion. Visiting hours will be held at the P.E. Murray F.J. Higgins George Doherty and Sons Funeral Home. It's located at 2000 Center Street in West Roxbury. It'll be held on Tuesday, April 8th, that's tomorrow, from 4 to 7 p.m. The funeral from the funeral home will be on Wednesday, April 9th, that's this Wednesday, at 10 a.m., followed by a funeral mass at St. Teresa of Avila Church at 11 a.m. The relatives and friends are kindly invited. The interment will be at St. Joseph Cemetery in West Roxbury. And that concludes the obituaries and death notices that are listed in today's Cape Cod Times, dated April 7th. Back to the cover with some national news. Powerful storms leave at least 16 people dead, by Susan Miller of USA Today. Torrential rainfalls fueled flooding that's ravaged communities from Texas to Ohio, destroying homes and businesses and sending structures floating down rivers and leaving thousands without power. Hundreds of roads were closed in Kentucky because of rising water and rock slides. Flooding tore apart a railroad bridge near Mammoth Spring, Arkansas, derailing a train and plunging cars into the Warm Fork Spring River. Some cities in Tennessee and Kentucky have already reported double-digit rainfall totals from the storms as of Sunday, AccuWeather said. The highest rainfall total was 13.4 inches in Mayfield, Kentucky, in the western part of the state, according to the Weather Prediction Center. A stationary atmospheric river, basically a river in the sky, first triggered tornadoes and relentless rain from Arkansas to Illinois on Wednesday and Thursday, and it continued into the weekend. Forecasters had warned that the system could dump several months' worth of rain in some areas. Parts of the storm's swamped south were under new tornado and flood alerts on Sunday, the latest threats from a multi-day bout of deadly, vicious weather that's left communities reeling across the U.S. Tornado warnings were issued in Alabama and Mississippi, and flash flood warnings were posted in Kentucky, Mississippi, and Tennessee, according to AccuWeather. Forecasters warned that certain areas could remain underwater into the coming week as river levels continue to rise from Arkansas to Ohio. At least 16 people have died, including 10 in Tennessee and 6 others across Missouri, Indiana, Kentucky, and Arkansas, the Associated Press reported. Floodwaters swept away a young boy in Frankfort, Kentucky, while he was walking to a school bus stop Friday morning. The Franklin County Coroner's Office identified the boy as Gabriel Andrews, 9 years old. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear warned Sunday that the state was not out of the woods. Kentucky, there is record flooding across our state with over 500 road closures. Rivers have not yet crested, so we still have a day, if not more, of rising waters. We've already lost 2 of our people, both children of God who were loved by many, he said. Flooding risks, particularly river flooding, remain Sunday in Tennessee, where the death toll from tornadoes and flooding doubled in 2 days to 10. We have several rivers expected to go into major flood, said Chrissy Hurley, a Nashville meteorologist with the National Weather Service. The Cumberland River in Clarksville and Red River in Port Royal have decent odds of hitting moderate and major flood stage. A stubborn frontal boundary was to begin shifting east on Sunday, according to the National Weather Service. With its eastward push, moisture along and ahead of the front will become focused from the Appalachians to the central Gulf Coast, setting the stage for intense downpour, producing thunderstorms throughout the day, the Weather Service said. Final story on the front page of today's Cape Cod Times, dated April 7th. Plot shows how hybrid war, quote-unquote, is waged. Details revealed about alleged Russian sabotage. This is reported by Anna Koper, Marek Sterchelke, Philip Lebedev, and Andreas Sitas of Reuters in Warsaw, Poland. Fake cosmetics, massage pillows, and sex toys. Crude homemade explosives. A Russian known as Warrior. A code word, Mary. These are among the key elements of a suspected Russian-run sabotage plot that led to 3 parcels being detonated at courier depots in Britain, Germany, and Poland last summer, a person with knowledge of the Polish investigation told Reuters. The pillows, packed into the parcels with the cosmetics and sex toys, contained hidden homemade incendiary devices made of a cocktail of chemicals including highly reactive magnesium, according to the person familiar with the case, who provided the most granular account yet of the alleged plot. The chemicals were ignited by pre-timed detonators, adapted from cheap Chinese electronic gadgets used to track items like lost keys, with the effect enhanced by the tubes of what looked like cosmetics, but in fact contained a gel made of flammable compounds, including nitromethane, according to the source. The proceedings in this case concern criminal activities inspired by Russia's GRU, this person said, referring to Moscow's Foreign Military Intelligence Agency. Reuters is reporting the details of the investigation for the first time, drawing on the account provided by the source close to the Polish case, as well as interviews with more than a dozen European security officials. The findings provide a rare insight into how sabotage campaigns play out on the ground. European security chiefs made the parcel fires public in October, describing them as part of a hybrid war, quote-unquote, being waged by Russia to destabilize the functioning of countries that support Ukraine, involving tactics like arson and cyber attacks. They said the parcels, which caught alight in warehouses, causing fires but not hurting anyone, were a dry run for a future Russian plot to detonate similar packages in midair on cargo flights to the U.S. and Canada. With the war in Ukraine, these attacks have intensified. They became more frequent, more assertive, said Nicolae Popescu, Moldova's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary until early last year, and now Distinguished Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations think tank. Of course, this poses a risk to people, to citizens across the European Union. The Kremlin rejected the accusation of Russia having a hand in the fires. "We know nothing about it," spokesman Dmitry Peskov told Reuters. "We don't rule this out that this is just more fake news or a manifestation of blind Russophobia." The Kremlin said European allegations of a Russian sabotage or hybrid campaign were wholly unsubstantiated. The GRU didn't respond to a request for comment. The package detonations took place July 19th, 20th, and 21st in the British city Birmingham, Leipzig in Germany, and near the Polish capital Warsaw. 2 EU security officials with knowledge of alleged attacks, who requested anonymity to discuss sensitive information, said the Polish cell was typical of Russian intelligence's methods. Russian handlers often recruit local criminals to carry out their plans, the officials added, giving them basic instructions via telegram and paying each operative up to a few thousand euros per job. The ingredients and igniters detailed in the case are widely available in stores selling products like fertilizer inputs and pyrotechnics, said Yaroslav Stelmach, a former bomb disposal specialist who runs the Safety Project. That's a consultancy that advises on the security of public buildings, among other things. While the small, crude devices might only be able to cause a small fire, they could be difficult to detect, he told Reuters. This is an extremely cheap, very effective, highly anonymous method of producing explosive devices, he added. The Polish prosecution case is based on testimony from at least 5 suspected members of the alleged sabotage cell, as well as the classified findings of security services, according to the person with knowledge of the investigation. The National Prosecutor's Office told Reuters that investigators had also seized a 4th parcel that failed to explode at a Warsaw depot, allowing them to examine the contents intact. Polish investigators allege a Ukrainian named Vladislav D., who lived in southern Poland, played a key role in the European dry run, acting on instructions he received on telegram from a GRU handler whom he knew only as Warrior, the source said. Polish law doesn't allow the public disclosure of the surnames of people facing criminal charges. However, the suspect's full name, Vladislav Derkovets, was publicly disclosed in a related court case in Bosnia, where there are no identification restrictions, in which another suspected member of the alleged parcel's plot faced extradition to Poland. On July 18th, Vladislav drove an Opel Astra from his home in Katowice across the border to the Lithuanian city of Kaunas, where he collected more than a dozen items from the trunk of a parked car, according to the person close to the Polish prosecution case. The 27-year-old then drove on to Lithuania's capital, Vilnius, where he boxed up 4 packages, each with a pillow, plus a few of the cosmetics tubes and sex toys. Before sealing them, he pressed 2 buttons to activate pre-timed detonation mechanisms, according to the source, who said the gadgets were of a type that allowed users to set trigger times from a few months to months ahead. On July 19th, he handed the parcels over to a man in a park in Vilnius who used the code word Mary, the person said. The packages were mailed on the same day from the city, he added. Vladislav was arrested in Poland in early August and charged with performing terrorist acts on behalf of Russian intelligence. In January, a Warsaw court extended his detention near the capital until May, while the investigation continues. Reuters was unable to contact Vladislav in detention, and his court-appointed lawyer said he couldn't comment, given his lack of knowledge of the details of the investigation, which is at a pretrial stage. The National Prosecutor's Office told Reuters that the suspect denied both the charges leveled at him, including working for a foreign intelligence agency, and provided extensive explanations for his actions, which the office said it was unable to disclose because of investigation confidentiality. In a sad and frustrating case, 2nd death of child with measles reported in Texas. Kennedy reportedly plans to attend the funeral, by Phaedra Trefan. A 2nd child with measles has died in Texas amid an outbreak that sickened more than 480 people in the state since January. 56 people have been hospitalized with measles as of Friday, according to the state's Department of Health. The exact cause of the latest death is still under investigation. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. plans to attend the child's funeral, NBC News reported. Kennedy, a longtime vaccine skeptic, had suggested people use vitamin A and cod liver oil to treat and prevent the highly contagious respiratory illness, prompting multiple children to need treatment for vitamin A toxicity last week. A child died from measles in late February as the outbreak in the state's South Plains and Lubbock regions spread. The child was not vaccinated against the disease. A 2-dose vaccine, please get it, usually administered as part of a combination with mumps and rubella vaccine known as the MMR vaccine, can prevent more than 97% of infections. If a vaccinated person does develop the illness, symptoms are generally mild. The illness is less contagious. As of Thursday, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention had reported 607 confirmed measles cases across 21 states. Alaska, California, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Kansas, Kentucky, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, New Mexico, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, and Washington. Measles is a highly contagious respiratory virus spread through contact with infectious droplets that become airborne through coughing, breathing, and sneezing. Without vaccinations, the measles virus can cause respiratory symptoms requiring hospitalization in about 1 in 5 cases. About 1 in 20 people with the virus will develop pneumonia, and in rare cases it can cause swelling of the brain and death. It can also cause pregnancy complications, premature births, and low birth weights. Measles symptoms can begin a week or two after infection and can include high fever, cough, runny nose, and watery red eyes. Some will develop a flat red facial rash that eventually spreads to the rest of the body. People are most contagious from about 4 days before the rash appears until about 4 days after. If you think you or someone in your household has measles, isolate at home and contact a trusted healthcare provider to arrange for testing. It's imperative to inform the provider about the possibility of measles and make appropriate arrangements to avoid exposing others to the virus. Our next headline, prosecutors recommend 7-year sentence for Santos. Former congressman pleaded guilty to charges. This is written by Jack Queen of Reuters. Former U.S. Representative George Santos, who was expelled from Congress after a brief and scandal-plagued tenure, should be sentenced to more than 7 years in prison for fraud and identity theft, federal prosecutors in Brooklyn said on Friday. Santos pleaded guilty in August of 2024 to 2 of the 23 criminal counts he faced for inflating fundraising numbers and faking donor names to qualify for financial support from the Republican Party during the 2022 election cycle, when the political newcomer was elected to represent a slice of New York City and its eastern suburbs. Santos's legal team asked for a 2-year sentence in a Friday court filing. His lawyer, Andrew Mansilla, said prosecutors were selling a false narrative to the court. Prosecutors recommended an 87-month sentence in a court filing on Friday, saying the top end of Santos's guideline sentence range was appropriate to reflect the seriousness of his unparalleled crimes. Santos planned and executed an assortment of fraudulent schemes and leveraged them and a fictitious life story to enrich himself and capture one of the highest offices in the government of the United States, prosecutors said. The government wants headlines, not justice. This vindictive 87-month demand ignores sentencing norms for similar cases, Mansilla said. During his campaign, Santos claimed that he attended New York University, that he had worked at Goldman Sachs and Citigroup, and that his grandparents had fled the Nazis during World War II. None of those claims were true. Santos pleaded guilty to 1 count of wire fraud, 1 count of aggravated identity theft before U.S. District Judge Joanna Sabert at a hearing in August. He apologized to his constituents in remarks made outside the courthouse in central Islip, New York, after the hearing. I deeply regret my conduct and the harm it has caused, and I accept full responsibility for my actions, Santos said. Santos was hit with federal charges in May of 2023 for laundering campaign funds to pay for his personal expenses, charging donors credit cards without their consent, and receiving unemployment benefits while he was employed. As part of his plea deal, Santos admitted to all of the wrongdoing described in the indictment, even though he only pleaded guilty to 2 of the 23 counts. Santos spent much of his 11 months in office engulfed in scandal, marginalized by his fellow lawmakers and mocked by late-night TV comedians following revelations that he had lied about much of his past. A bipartisan investigation by the House Ethics Committee found he spent campaign money on Botox, luxury brands such as Hermes, and OnlyFans, an online platform known for sexual content. His indictment prompted lawmakers to expel Santos from the House of Representatives in December. And in an effort to calm the markets, Trump officials address stock market doldrums. Rollins says, "We knew there'd be uncertainty," by Zachary Shermley of USA Today in Washington. After President Donald Trump announced wide-reaching tariffs on American trade partners last week, the U.S. stock market suffered its worst losses since the COVID-19 pandemic. White House officials and cabinet secretaries fanned out over the weekend to defend Trump's economic strategy, underlining his efforts to spur companies to create more domestic manufacturing jobs and to reduce trade deficits with other countries. But they also addressed the hit markets took after Trump's tariff rollout last week. In the 2 trading days since Wednesday's announcement, the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 9.2%, the S&P 500 fell 10.5%, and the tech-heavy NASDAQ tumbled 11.4%. Quote, "The idea that we didn't know that there'd be some uncertainty just isn't true," said Brooke Rollins, the Secretary of Agriculture on CNN's State of the Union. "We knew there would be uncertainty." But Rollins urged Americans not to look at Thursday and Friday's trading and say the world is ending, the markets are crashing. Instead, she argued, the markets are adjusting. Trump's top officials were repeatedly asked on Sunday about fears of a global recession and widespread anxiety over the near certainty that prices will rise for many goods. And they were pressed on the president's own social media post in which he reposted a video that said he was purposely crashing the market without comment. Kevin Hassett, the director of the White House Economic Council, was asked on ABC's This Week about the post Trump shared, which argued his tariff regime was part of a strategy to ultimately lower interest rates. He's not trying to tank the market, he's trying to deliver for American workers, Hassett said. It's not a strategy for the markets to crash. Scott Bessent, Trump's Treasury Secretary, urged Americans who have lost money in the market to take a long-term view on their investments. "Oh, don't look at the day-to-day fluctuations at what's happening," he said on NBC's Meet the Press. Despite White House calls for Americans not to worry, the economic uncertainty prompted by Trump's tariffs has become one of the first major points of difference between the president and congressional Republicans. 4 GOP lawmakers in the U.S. Senate joined with Democrats last week to pass legislation that would rein in his control over tariff policy, though the legislation has no chance of passage in the House or of his signature. However, 2 senators, 1 Republican and 1 Democrat, also introduced a bill last week that would require the president to get congressional approval for universal tariffs. More on Trump. Trump calls Loomer a very good patriot. Activist met president before officials were fired, by Riley Beggin of USA Today in Washington. Far-right activist and social media influencer Laura Loomer has long been an incendiary figure in conservative media circles. She now seems to have the ear of President Donald Trump, who last week fired senior national security officials after Loomer showed him research on the officials that she suspects had not been sufficiently loyal to the commander-in-chief. Loomer visited the White House Wednesday and said in a subsequent post on X that she presented him with research findings and promised to continue to push for strong vetting. At least 4 senior officials were fired after that meeting, including 3 with ties to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Trump told reporters he considered Loomer a very good patriot and a very strong person, quote unquote. He said that during her White House visit, she'd made job recommendations, though he said she wasn't involved with the National Security Council firings. Loomer spent time with Trump on the campaign trail promoting claims such as a conspiracy theory about Haitian immigrants eating dogs and cats in Ohio, which Trump mentioned at a presidential debate. Loomer first grabbed headlines a decade ago as a college student at Barry University in Miami, when she alerted a far-right website, Gateway Pundit, that an imam was participating in a memorial on campus to the victims of September 11th attacks. She went on to promote bigoted takes on Muslims and Islam. She was suspended after she filmed a video picked up by the far-right group Project Veritas, asking the university to let her start a pro-ISIS student group. She worked with Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe for years afterward. Loomer quickly became a social media influencer in right-wing circles where she repeated Islamophobic claims and conspiracy theories. She's called herself a proud Islamophobe and called Islam a cancer on society. In 2017, she left Project Veritas and joined far-right Canadian media outlet Rebel Media. Her media credentials were revoked in 2018 when she confronted the widow and domestic violence survivor of the Pulse nightclub shooter, who was on trial for aiding her former husband. The widow was acquitted of all charges. Loomer was banned from Twitter in 2018 for violating its rules against hate speech, though her account was reinstated when Elon Musk purchased the platform, now known as X. Loomer has run for Congress in Florida twice. In 2019, she ran for Florida's 21st Congressional District, a Democratic seat that includes Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Incumbent Democrat Representative Lois Frankel defeated her by 20 points. In 2022, she ran for a different congressional seat against Republican Representative Daniel Webster on a platform of severely limiting immigration. Webster defeated her in the primary by 7 points. She has supported Trump since he started his political career and actively opposed Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' challenge against him in the presidential primary. Trump said this week she'll always have something to say, usually very constructive. Loomer spent time in Trump's entourage on the campaign trail last year, including a visit to a 9/11 memorial event at Ground Zero in New York, despite the fact that she had previously incorrectly alleged U.S. involvement in the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001 that killed 2,996 people, saying it was done by the United States to itself. She always has something to say, usually very constructive, said Trump. And we'll finish off our reading with a little bit of advice from Ask Carolyn. Does spouse get a say in whether wife cuts ties with her family? Dear Carolyn, my wife has always felt like the black sheep of her family. They're not abusive or neglectful. It's just that her siblings and parents share similar personalities and political beliefs and interests, and she seems to have been born the opposite. She believes her parents favored her siblings because they saw more of themselves in them. We're expecting our first child, and my wife feels like she's once again getting the short end of the stick. For example, my mother-in-law is hosting a shower, but at her house instead of a lavish restaurant like she did for my wife's older sister. My wife is now seriously thinking of limiting their interactions with our child because she believes the child will be similarly unfavored, and it'll be damaging to them. She's already fantasizing about skipping the next big holiday season, which would be our child's first Thanksgiving and Christmas, etc. I understand she's emotional. I try to be sympathetic and supportive, but I come from a small family. I've always relished the idea of our child being close to extended family. The way I see it, my wife's not even willing to give that a chance. When I've tried to talk about it, she snapped at me and accused me of downplaying her emotional needs. Do I get a say in my wife cutting off her family? Signed, Spouse. Dear Spouse, I won't defend snapping, but your wife is right. This is her family. You don't get to push her to feel awkward or underloved just because you envisioned a role for them. Plus, I understand she's emotional type comments are dismissive. Concerns are either valid or not, and she's telling you that they are valid. Your desire for a sprawly family for your child's valid too. Don't misunderstand me. It's your means and your borderline insistence on it that are a problem. You've basically said doing this to spare your baby your childhood pain supersedes her pain at having a bad family experience. Please think on that a good while. I take your point that your wife essentially refuses to find out in one Thanksgiving whether her concern about old favoritism patterns is founded. But even then, the person who grew up with this family gets to veto such an emotional fact-finding holiday because she's the one who'd have to chew turkey and watch her parents not bond with her baby. Hypothetically, sure, but are you going to minimize what she's facing or validate it? She may be more willing to take this on in time. And with that advice, we've come to the end of our reading of the Cape Cod Times for today, Monday, April 7th of 2025. This is your reader, Eric, saying be well, be safe, look after each other, and remember our veterans, especially those we've lost recently. Bye for now.